Hi everyone, this is Raja from Charger Games and welcome back to another new video. So in this video we're going to be learning how to create a cool little Android game within a very short amount of time. So I hope you're really excited. First of all, let's take a look at what you're going to be building at the end of this video. So here I have a simulator open so that I can show you how it looks in a real mobile device. I'm going to click on play. And here I have the play button. I can click on it and the game starts and the player starts running. And here we have our obstacles and we need to jump to avoid the obstacles. And whenever we collide, our game gets restarted. So we need to jump our player in order to avoid the obstacles, and that's how we can score high. And whenever we collide, the game stops and we can restart. So that's how the game is. It is a completely working game and I'm going to show you how to build this. So let's get started. Alright, so here I have opened up the Unity Hub. So what you're going to be doing is you need to make sure you go to this Installs tab. From here you can go to this Install Editor option and make sure to use the latest version or the latest LTS version. This LTS is long-term support and this one is the latest version. So you can go ahead, simply click on Install. And then from here, make sure you select this Android build support, Android SDK NDK and OpenJDK, and then you can click on continue. Also, you need to install this Microsoft Visual Studio if you don't have it installed already. And make sure you install all these three things, only then you will be able to build for Android. So once you have done that, simply click on continue and it will be installed. So when you have installed Unity and all the required components, we're gonna go to this projects tab and click on this new project. Now from here you need to choose either you are going to create a 2D or 3D project. In this case we're going to create a 3D core, so we're going to select this one, and from the top make sure to select the latest version of the editor that you're going to be using in this case. Alright, then from here you need to give a name to your project. I'm going to name it Cube Runner, and then I'm going to simply click on create project and it's going to go ahead and create a new project for us. So let's wait for it to create a new project. Alright, so here we have a brand new Unity project opened up. So this is the default layout that you see whenever Unity opens. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this top right corner, and from the default I'm going to choose this 2x3 layout because that's the layout I prefer for building my games. Alright, so now on the top, as you can see, we have Windows, Mac and Linux written because this is the current platform on which we are working, but we're going to build it for Android. So we're going to go to File, Build Settings, and from here you have to select this Android, and you will have this option only when you install the Android build options from the Unity editor as I've shown you. So now after selecting this Android, simply click on this switch platform and our current platform will be switched to Android. It will take some time, so let's wait for it. So now as you can see, here we have the Unity logo. That means the Android is our current platform, and if we close it, on the top as you can see we have Android written here. That means our build target is currently set to Android. Okay, so now that's done, we're gonna go to our scenes folder, and here we have a sample scene. I'm gonna go ahead and simply rename it to game. Okay, so now the name of our scene is game. Okay, so now with that done, here on the game tab, as you can see here we have free aspect written. I'm gonna click on it, and from here we're gonna choose this 16:9 or 16:9 portrait resolution because this is what gonna be suitable for our mobile devices. Alright, now I'm gonna select the main camera. As you can see in our hierarchy we have this main camera. I'm gonna select it, and from the options we're gonna disable the skybox and select solid color. And from the background you can go ahead and choose a suitable color for your game. I think I'm gonna choose something like this. You can use any other color that you want to. I'm gonna select something like this for now. Later I can change it as well. Alright, so now that we have the camera, on the assets folder, let's create few folders which you're gonna be using. First of all, I'm gonna create a new folder called scripts. Inside this we will have our scripts. We're gonna create another new folder. We're gonna call it, let's say, materials. So these are the materials that you're gonna be using in this case. So from here we're gonna go to this, go to 3D object and create a cube. Alright, so here as you can see we have a cube at the center of our game. Now this blue sign that you're seeing is the z-axis or the z-axis, and the red sign that you can see is our red arrow that you can see is our x-axis. So you can simply press the Alt key on your keyboard and then press the left mouse button to rotate your view like this. Okay, so make sure to select a view where the arrow key, the blue arrow key is at the front because our Z axis should be at the front always. Okay, so now I'm going to select the cube and set the Z scale to, let's say, 20. 20 is very small, or let's say make it 200 at once so that we don't have to change it again. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and rename this cube to ground because this is going to be our ground. All right, so now I'm going to go to this materials folder. From assets, I'm going to go to this materials folder, and here I'm going to right click, create a new material. I'm going to name this one mat 1, let's say mat 1, and then I'm going to select it and press Ctrl D to duplicate it a few times so that we can create 3-4 materials that you can use later. For the first material, we're going to go ahead and select this albedo option, and from here I'm going to select this green like color because that's what we're going to give to our project. That's what we're going to give to our ground. So I'm going to drag and drop this material 1 over our ground here or here, anywhere we want. Okay, and now again I can change the color to any other option that I want. I think I'm going to keep it something like this. All right, so now here we have our ground. I'm going to select the ground, and from the tag, as you can see, currently we have it untagged. So I'm going to select here, go to add tag, click plus, and give it a tag ground, just like this, and then select ground, go here and select the ground tag. So now our ground has a ground tag attached, and we will need it later. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a 3D object, a cube again, and I'm going to name this cube player. Then I'm going to select the material 2. First of all, let's select our player and move it a little bit upwards. I think let's make the Y position 1, and that will make it perfectly sit on top of our ground. Now let's select our material 2 and go to the albedo and select a red like color, something like this. And now I'm going to drag and drop this one on our player. All right, so this is our player. I can make it a little bit like this if I want to. Okay, so now this way we have our ground and our player both ready. Now we need to set our camera so that it looks cool. Also, when we can select our player, go to the tag, and as you can see already we have this player tag created, so we can select the player tag so that our player has a player tag attached. All right, so now that's done. We're gonna go here and select our camera and change its position a little bit. So you can scroll or rotate your mouse wheel to zoom in or zoom out this scene view. So I'm gonna scroll down to zoom out, and here the red button is the x-axis, and we're gonna move our camera at the x-axis like this and change the Y rotation of the camera to something like, let's say, 45. Actually negative 45. So this is the kind of view that we actually want. I can also make the X position a little bit too far, something like this, and by selecting this one we're gonna put it a little bit upwards, somewhere like this. So this way it can be it's gonna be at the view where we actually want it to be. Okay, so something like this should be all right. This one looks like our game is at the correct position. Also, we can select the field of view and we can make the field of view bigger or smaller from here. So I think I'm gonna make it something like this, and then I'm gonna make it something like this. All right, so this view looks cool, and this is looking already like a game. You can keep it like this, keep it like this, whatever you prefer for your game, because it's your own game. So I think I'm gonna keep it somewhere like this. This one looks good. So with that done, we have our player, we have our ground. Let's go ahead and create a simple obstacle. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a 3D object, and you guessed it right, we're gonna create a cube. We're gonna name it obstacle, and let's move it a little bit on this side, and we're gonna make its X scale to, let's say 2, not 2, 10, or let's say 5. I think 5 should be good, and the Y scale to 2 is too good. I think 2 is good, and we can position it about at 0.5. All right, so this one looks good. So this is how our obstacles will be, and this will come slowly towards our player, and our player will have to dodge them. Now let's select the material 3 and select a color suitable for our player, not our player, for our enemy. And I think I'm gonna select something like this and drag and drop it right here. I can even change it like this. Okay, so this is how this looks and this is how things are. So this looks pretty cool. This is our player, this is our ground, and this is our obstacle. Also select our obstacle, go to untagged, click plus, create a new tag, name it obstacle. The O is capital, remember that. Select our obstacle and select the obstacle tag right here. Alright, so this way we have our player, ground, and obstacle ready. So let's move our obstacle a little bit backwards, and first of all let's create a script and program our player so that I can jump our player by tapping on the screen. So inside the scripts folder, right click and create a new C# script, and we're going to name this one player controller. Also you can simply name it player or anything you want to. Now select our player and drag and drop this player controller onto our player. So now this player controller script is attached to our player. Now what we need to do is we also need to add a rigid body component to our player. So we're going to go to add component, physics, and then you're going to add a rigid body to it. So this rigid body is what makes this one interact with physics. If you want to get the built-in functionalities of physics from Unity, we need to add a rigid body component to it. So now as you can see, it already has a gravity, it has a drag, and all this stuff. We don't need this. We're going to make it 0. We simply need this gravity and we'll keep it. Now from the constraints, we're gonna change the freeze rotation. We don't need to rotate our player at any axis. We only need to make it jump on the y-axis. That's why we're gonna keep the y still, and we're gonna freeze position at x and freeze position at z. Okay, so now that's done. We're gonna double click to open player controller in Visual Studio. So let's double click to open it. Alright, so now our player controller script has opened up in Visual Studio. So first of all, here we'll need a few variables which will decide how our game works. So first of all, here we're going to create a new variable called rigid body, and we're going to name it RB. Then we need another variable called public float jump force. So this will decide how much the player can jump. Okay, and another variable here we're going to create is bool can jump. So this will decide whether our player can jump or not. Alright, so with that done, now here we're gonna create a awake function. So we're gonna write void awake, which gets called even before start, when we start the game. And inside the awake we're gonna say rb equals get component rigid body. This will get the rigid body that we have attached to our game object and store its reference inside this RB variable. So now whatever we want to do with this rigid body, we want to add gravity, we want to add force, we want to add velocity, we can do it simply by using this RB variable. Alright, so now that we have this, what you're going to be doing is inside this update function, we're going to check if we are tapping or clicking on the screen. So to do that, we're going to say if input dot get mouse button down, and within brackets we're going to write 0. That means whether we are clicking the left mouse button. This 0 means left mouse button, and this one works for touch as well. So you don't need to worry whether you are working on mobile or PC. This one works for both, and this one works greatly on mobile as well. I have tested it multiple times. So if input dot get mouse button down 0, that means whenever we are tapping on our screen or clicking our mouse, then we need to make our player jump. Okay, so in order to make our player jump, what you're going to be doing is we're going to write rb.add force. So we're going to add a simple force, and at which direction we're going to add force? We're going to add the force towards the upwards direction. So that's why we're going to write vector3.up multiplied by jump force. Okay, and then after a comma, we're going to write force mode dot impulse. So this will make the jump force a little more effective, and quickly the player will be jumping higher. Okay, if we don't make it impulse, then we will have to give a lot higher jump force like 300, 400, but with it impulse we can simply make it 10, 20, and the player will jump really high. Okay, so now whenever we click the mouse button, our player should jump up with this jump force. Okay, so now let's go to the editor and check how it's working. Alright, so here we are inside the Unity editor. Here we have our player, here we have our rigid body, and here we have our player controller. So let's make the jump force to about, let's say 20, and see how it's working. So let's click on play. And now if I click on play, you will see our player jumps a lot higher. So let's go ahead and make the value about 10. and see how it's working. And this is how the tail looks like. But as you can see, it seems like the player is floating and the player is not coming to ground quickly. So in order to fix this, what we can do is, as you can see here, we have a gravity defined by Unity. We can go ahead and increase the amount of gravity so that the player falls down faster. To do that, we need to go to Edit, Project Settings, and then you need to go to Physics. And inside Physics, as you can see here, we have the gravity and it is set to -9.81, which is default for Earth or for real world. But in this game, we're gonna go ahead and make it higher. Let's say we're gonna make it about, I think let's say make it -50. So now we have a gravity of about -50. That is a lot higher. So now, as you can see, when I click on play, if I press here, as you can see, it jumps really fast. So now we're gonna go ahead and make the jump force a little higher. Let's say make it 15. And now if I click on play, now as you can see, the player can jump and it looks really cool. So let's go ahead and make our obstacle somewhere like this, and let's see if our player can jump on it. Yes, the player can easily jump over it. So I think 15 should be good, or later we can change it to any value that you want to. All right, so now our player is okay, but we have one more problem. If we click again and again, you can see our player can jump infinite amount of time, but we don't want it. We want our player to jump only when it is grounded or when it is on our ground. Okay, so we need to find a way so that we can make the player jump only once when it is grounded and not again jump higher. Okay, so for that, we're gonna go ahead and open up our player script one more time. Open up our player controller script, and here we're gonna check. Here we're gonna call a function called void on collision enter. So this function gets called whenever our rigid body or our player collides with any other object. Okay, so in this case, whenever it collides with the ground, we're gonna check if collision.gameObject.tag equals ground. All right. So if it collides with the ground, that means we are currently grounded. And that is the time we're gonna make the can jump to true. So whenever the player lands on the ground, we're gonna say can jump equals true. All right. And then we're gonna create another function which will be void on collision exit. And here we're gonna say if collision.gameObject.tag equals ground. So this function gets called whenever our player exits from the collision. That is, whenever the player will jump, it will exit colliding from the ground, and that is the time we're gonna make the can jump to false. So now what will happen is, whenever the player is on the ground, the can jump will be true. That means the player can jump now. And whenever the player will be in the air, the can jump will be false. That means the player will not be able to jump anymore. Okay. Now, in order to make this condition work, what you're going to be doing is, here we're going to say, if we press the mouse button or if we tap on the screen and we're going to write 2 ampersand, that means we are joining two conditions and can jump. That means when we are pressing the mouse button or tapping on the screen and we can jump, that is when we want to add the force. So this way we can prevent the player jumping multiple times when it is not grounded. So let's go ahead and test how it's working. So here we are in the editor. Let's click on play. And now, as you can see, when I click on play, I can jump only once and we cannot jump multiple times. That's because only when it is grounded, our player will jump, and otherwise it's not gonna jump. So that's what we have done. And in order to make it perform correctly, make sure you have this ground tag attached, and also make sure your player has this rigid body and this collider and all these things. Otherwise, these things will not work correctly. So now that we have our player working correctly, we need to make our obstacle move towards the player just like this. Okay, so now we're gonna select our obstacle, and from here, as you can see, we have a collider attached. We're gonna go ahead and check this is trigger option. So when we don't have this is trigger, our collider can collide with the player. But when we have this is trigger option, the collider will detect collisions, but it can still go through the player. Okay, because we have two colliders here, the ground and the obstacle. So we're gonna make the ground collide and the obstacle trigger. Okay. So now here we have the obstacle. We're going to go to the scripts folder, create a new C# script, and I'm going to name this one obstacle. And then I'm going to select my obstacle and drag and drop this obstacle right here, and then double click to open the script in Visual Studio. Okay, so now here, only thing we need to do is we need to simply add a speed. So here we're going to create a public float speed variable, and inside update we're going to say transform dot translate. That means we are simply moving the object or translating the object. At which direction? We're going to translate it to vector3 dot forward direction. The forward direction means the z direction. Okay, and then we need to multiply it with speed, and then again we need to multiply it with time dot delta time to make sure the movement is very smooth and time independent. All right, so now with this code, obstacle will slowly move towards the player, but that will depend on the speed value. Okay, we need to make the speed negative so that the obstacle actually moves towards the player, otherwise it will go towards the z direction. Okay, then we're going to create another function, void on become invisible. So this function gets called automatically whenever our obstacle is invisible to the camera. So whenever it goes out of the screen, we need to simply destroy game object. So whenever our obstacle goes out of the screen, it actually gets destroyed. So that's what we want. Okay, so with that done, now let's go to Unity and check how it's working. So here we have our obstacle, here we have a speed. Let's move the obstacle like this, and let's change the speed value to something like -8 and see how it's working. I think I need to make it a little bit faster. Let's make it -10. And let's prove it somewhere like this. Is it okay? I think this one looks pretty good. Okay, so I think this one looks pretty good, so I think I'm going to keep it -10. And if you make it simply +10, then it will go and move towards this axis, which we don't really want. Okay, so with that done, now our obstacle is ready. Now we're going to reuse this obstacle again and again. For that, we need to make it a prefab. Okay, so prefab is an object which you can reuse again and again with the same properties. We don't need to create it again. Okay, so inside assets, we're going to create a new folder. We're going to name it prefab. And inside the prefab folder, I'm going to drag and drop our obstacle. Now, as you can see, it has become blue. That means it has become a prefab. Okay, so now we have our player and we have our obstacle. Now, what we're going to do is whenever our obstacle touches the player, we want to reload the scene because then the game will be over. Okay, so in order to do that, let's open up our player script one more time. Let's open up our player controller. And here we're going to create another new function. We're going to call it void on trigger enter. Okay, and here as you can see, we have the on trigger enter, and here the collider with which we are colliding is inside this other variable. So inside the other variable, we have all the properties of the collider with which we are colliding. That is our enemy. So here we're going to detect if we are colliding with the enemy or not. So we're going to say if other.gameObject.tag equals our obstacle. All right, so if we are colliding with the obstacle, then we're going to simply go ahead and restart the scene. And in order to restart the scene, first of all, we need to import the scene management namespace of Unity. So on the top, you need to write using Unity engine.scene management. All right, and then here we need to write scene manager dot load scene, and inside this we're going to write the name of the scene, and the name of the scene is game. Exactly, you need to write it with exact capitalization. As you can see here, with G is capital, then the things are small. So whatever you have named your scene, you can simply write it within quotations here, and that's how the scene will be reloaded whenever this on trigger enter calls and whenever it collides with the obstacle. Okay, so now let's go back to Unity. So here we have our player, here we have our obstacle, and let's check if the scene gets reloaded or not. So let's click on play, and whenever the player collides, as you can see, the scene gets reloaded. As you can see, the scene automatically gets reloaded whenever the player collides with it. Now, a lot of times this scene reloading doesn't work. So what you can do is you need to go to this file, build settings, and make sure you add open scenes. Whenever you click on this add open scenes, your scene will automatically be added to the build, and that is when this will work correctly in your case or in every case. So now that we have this obstacle and the player ready, now we need to find a way to spawn the obstacles again and again so that it goes again and again and it comes towards the player, and whenever it collides, our game gets restarted. So for that, we're gonna go ahead and create a new game manager, and that will take care of everything. So here we're gonna create a new empty game object. We're gonna name it game manager, and inside the scripts, we're gonna go ahead and create a new C# script. We're gonna name it game manager as well. Now I'm going to select the game manager and drag and drop the game manager script on top of it. So here we have our game manager now. Now let's go ahead and open up our game manager. Here we have our game manager script. Here we will need a lot of references. So first of all, here we're going to create a public game object obstacle. So this will be a reference to our obstacle because we need to spawn it again and again. So we need a reference to it. Then we need a public transform spawn point. So this is the point from where our obstacles will start spawning. This is the position from where our obstacles will start spawning. Okay. Then here we need a int score variable. In the beginning it will be 0. So this will be the value of our score. Okay. Now here what you're gonna be doing is, here we're gonna create a void game start function, and we also need to make it public. So you need to make it public void game start. This will take care of everything whenever the game starts, like it will start spawning, it will start keeping the score and all that. Now let's see how we can actually start spawning. For that, we're going to use something called coroutines, because whenever we are spawning our obstacles, we need to spawn it after some time, after random times. Let's say first obstacle we spawn it after 1 second, the second one will be after 2 seconds, the third one will be after let's say 0.8 seconds or something like that. So that's why we're going to create a coroutine, and for that we need to write enumerator, and we're going to name it spawn obstacles. Okay, so inside this enumerator, actually we need a pair of parentheses here. So inside this enumerator spawn obstacles, what we're going to be doing is we're going to write a while true loop. So this is going to be an infinite loop. So this will run until we don't stop it externally. So inside this, we're gonna simply go ahead and spawn our obstacles at a random amount of delay. Okay, so for that, we're gonna first of all create a random wait time for our obstacles to be spawned. So we're gonna write float wait time equals random.range. So we need to create a range between which we're gonna create a random number, and after that random amount of time, we're gonna spawn our obstacles. So the two random amount of times in our case will be 0.2 and 2. Okay, 0.2, let's write an F here and F here as well. So whenever this code runs, this will generate a random value between 0.2 and 2 seconds, and our game will wait for that amount of time, and after that it will spawn the next obstacle. Okay, so here we're going to write yield return new wait for seconds, and here you're going to write wait time. So our game will stop, or not the game, this thing or this function, this loop will wait for this random amount of time, and after that it will spawn the obstacles. In order to spawn it, we write instantiate, and what are you going to spawn? We're going to spawn our obstacle game object, which we have a reference to here. So here we're going to write instantiate obstacle, then we have to write the position where we want to spawn it, and here we already have a transform component where we want to spawn it. So we're going to write spawn point dot position, and then it will write the rotation which we want to give to our game object, but we don't want any external rotation. We just need to simply keep it at the same default rotation. For that, you're going to write quaternion dot identity. That means no rotation at all. All right, so now whenever this loop runs, whenever this coroutine runs, automatically a random number will be generated, and it will wait for a random amount of time, and after that it will spawn the next obstacle, and that's how random obstacles will be spawned. So now inside the game start, we're gonna start this coroutine. For that we're gonna write start coroutine, and inside this, within double quotations, we need to write the name exactly same. So let's go ahead and copy it so that we don't make any mistakes. Let's copy it and paste it right here. So now whenever the game start function gets called, automatically these spawn obstacles will be called as well. Okay, now inside our start, for now we're gonna simply call our game start function because we don't have another way to do it for now. So we're gonna simply call it inside our start function. Okay, so now whenever the game starts, our game start function will be called. It will call the coroutine, and the coroutine will be started, and our obstacles should spawn. So let's go ahead and check how it's working in Unity. Alright, so here we have our game manager, and as you can see, it is asking for an obstacle. So we're gonna go to our prefab folder, and from inside prefab folder, we're gonna drag and drop our obstacle, and make sure to drag it inside the prefab folder, from inside the prefab folder, and not from the scene, because this one will be deleted after some time and this is not going to work. So we're going to disable this obstacle from now because we don't need it right now. We're going to go ahead and create a new empty game object, and we're going to name this one spawn point, and I think we're going to position it a little bit away from the player because this is the position from where we actually want to start our obstacles to spawn. Let's make the Y position to 0.5 because that is the default Y position of our obstacles as well. So we're gonna make the spawn points Y position to 0.5, and the Z position should be about, let's say 20, something like this should be okay. We can change it later as well. Now let's select our game manager and drag and drop our spawn point directly here. So now our game manager has access to the obstacle. Also, it has access to the spawn point. So now let's click on play and see if it is working or not. So now as you can see, automatically our obstacles start spawning after random amount of time, and that's how they are coming towards our player, and the player has to jump between them, and that's how things are. So now as you can see, the game is working, the player can move and the obstacles come automatically, but there are some problems. So what you can do is we can simply go ahead and adjust the jump force of the player and make it a little bit higher. Let's make it 18. And also, as you can see, our obstacles are coming too fast. So we're gonna go to our obstacle script and we're gonna make the random value, not the obstacle script, the game manager script. We're gonna make the random value. Okay, so here we have written 0.2. We did write 0.5, which should be the minimum number. Okay, so 0.5 and 2 should be good in our case, and that thing should work right. We can also adjust the player speed according to our own wish to make sure it's working correctly. So with that done, now let's go back to Unity. So now we need to create a score mechanism, and also we need to create a button so that whenever we click it, our game starts. So for that we need to create a canvas. So we're going to click here, go to UI and create a new canvas. And as you can see, automatically a new canvas will be created, inside which we will have all our UI elements. So from the canvas, we're going to change the UI scale mode to scale with screen size. That means our UI elements will be automatically changing towards the screen wherever we put the game. So let's say we put it in a smaller screen, the UI elements will be smaller. When we put it in a larger game, the UI elements will be automatically scale according to our screen size. Okay, and for the reference resolution, let's give it 1920 by 1080, which should be all right. And let's set the match to 0.5. Okay, so with that done, now we have our canvas ready. Let's right click, go to UI and create a new UI text mesh pro text, and for that we're going to import the TMP essentials. Let's click on that, and now we have the essentials imported, and here we have a text as well. Now as you can see here, it's hard to edit the text in this view, so we're going to go to this 2D mode so that we can easily edit this UI, and we can double click on this text so that it can focus on the text wherever that is. So as you can see, currently we have the text right here. We're going to go ahead and rename it to score text. So let's make it score text. Okay, and for this text, text content, we're gonna make it to 0 because it will be a number which will keep increasing according to our game. Now make sure you select this rect selection tool or rect tool, and then drag the corners to make it larger, because otherwise we cannot make it bigger, because we need to make it bigger. And then we're gonna position it somewhere like this and change the font size to higher, just like this. As you can see, currently the font size is 40. We can go ahead and make it about, let's say, something like 200. And I think make it a little more bigger, 300 should be okay. And now we need to keep it at the center of our screen, and then we need to put this one at the center as well. So for that, from these options, from these alignment options, we're gonna choose center vertically and center horizontally as well. And then we're gonna make it a little bit smaller, something like this, and then you can simply put it somewhere like this. Now I'm gonna select the color and change the alpha value somewhere like this. So this one looks a little more professional than how it is. So now from here the score will go to 1, 10, 100, 1000, 10,000 and all that, and we will not have any problems. Okay, so here our score text will be shown. So along with the score text, we will also need to create a new button, which by clicking which we can actually start the game. So we're going to select the canvas, create an UI. We're going to click on this button text mesh pro. So here we have a new button, and we're going to name this one to, let's say, play button. Okay, so now here we have the play button. We can double click to actually zoom in it. Here we have the play button. Now here we can simply go ahead and use this button as it is, and we can simply go ahead and change the play text to play. Let's say we write play here, and whenever the game starts, we can start playing. But we can also decorate it a little bit to make it a little more cooler than how it is. So for that, we're gonna go ahead and delete the text because we don't need it. Select the play button, and as you can see here, we have a UI sprite image. You can go ahead and download any other button image that you want, or you can create your own using Photoshop or any other photo editor, and then use that button image as the UI sprite right here. So I have downloaded a button image from flaticon.com, and I'm going to use that. So inside the assets, I'm going to import that one. So here I have imported the button image, and as you can see, it has been imported as a default. So I'm going to choose the texture type and change it to Sprite 2D and UI. Make sure you have this Sprite 2D and UI selected, and then click on apply. Only then you will be able to use this as your UI image. Now we're going to select our button, this play button, go to this UI sprite and drag and drop this play button right here. So now as you can see, we have the play button here. Now as you can see, it is a little bit distorted, so you can simply drag it to change it, or you can simply click on this set native size to set it to the correct size. Then you can go ahead and make it smaller or bigger according to your own wish. I think I want to make it a little smaller, something like this, and position it somewhere like this. Now, whenever this button is pressed, I want the game to start. And we have everything inside the game start function, so which will decide what to do when the game starts. So now we need to select our play button, and here we need to add an on-click event to detect clicks on that button. So I'm going to click on plus, and now here it is asking for an object where we have the functions which we want to call. So we have the functions inside this game manager script. So you're going to drag and drop this game manager right here. And now from the functions, we're going to go to game manager and use this game start function. Okay. So now whenever we press this button, automatically this game start function will be called. And make sure you have made this game start a public function, because otherwise it's not going to work. So make sure to make it a public, only then this is going to work. Okay. So now that's done. We have this score text set, and we have this play button set. So now all we need to do is, whenever the game starts, we need to keep updating the score, and also we need to start the game whenever the play button is pressed. So let's go ahead and do that inside our game manager. Alright, so here we are inside the game manager. Here we need a few references. Here first of all, we need a reference to the text score object. For that, we also need to import our UI elements. As you can see here, we are using the UI from the Text Mesh Pro module. You can also use the Unity's default text. In that case, you need to simply write using unityengine.ui. But in this case, I need to write using TM Pro, because we are using the Text Mesh Pro text and buttons. Now here we need to write a reference to the Text Mesh Pro button. So we're going to write public text mesh pro UGUI, and then it writes score text. So inside this, we will have a reference to our score text that we have created, and then we can actually use it to do whatever we want to. Then we will need another reference to our play button that we have created. So for that, here we're going to write public game object, and we're going to write play button. Okay. So now we don't need to start the game from the game start. So we're going to go ahead and delete this, because we are already calling the game start function whenever we are pressing our play button. Okay. So inside the game start function, we need to start spawning the obstacles. Also, we need to actually activate the player whenever the game starts, because if the player is on the screen from the beginning, it will not look good. So we will deactivate the player in the beginning, and then we will activate it whenever the game starts. So here we will also need a reference to the player. So we're going to write public game object player, and here we're going to write player dot set active to true. So whenever the game starts, we want to set the player to activated, and we also want to make the play button dot set active to false. Okay. So whenever the game starts, we want to activate the player and deactivate the play button, because when the game starts, we don't want the play button to be on the screen. That will look really weird. Also, we need to update the score, but we haven't created anything that can update the score yet. So what we can do is, here we can create a new function. We're going to call it void score up. This function will simply go and do score plus plus. So whenever this function is called, the score will be incremented by 1. And then we also need to update the score text on the screen to update this score value. For that, here we're going to write score text dot text equals score. Now this is an integer and this is a string, so this is not going to work. So we need to convert this integer to a string. So we can write dot to string. So now whenever our score value is, let's say it is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever the value is, that value will be automatically shown on the score text on our screen. Okay. Now we need to simply call this score up function after a certain amount of times repeatedly, so that our score gets incremented again and again. For that, here we're going to create invoke repeating function. So this invoke repeating can call any function repeatedly. Inside that, within double quotations, we're going to write score up. So now the score up function will be called again and again. After how many times? We need to write that here. So we need to start it after 2 seconds, and then after every 1 second, the score will be incremented. Okay. So here we are saying is, we need to call this score up function after 2 seconds, and then every 1 second call it again and again and again and again. So that way our score will be keep incrementing, and our score text will also keep incrementing. Now here I have made a mistake. As you can see, the P is capital, but here the P is small. This is very important. Once that happens, this is not going to work. So make sure to copy this one from here and paste it exactly same as it is written here. Otherwise, this is not going to work. So now we have all things set. We have the score up. We are activating the player, deactivating the play button whenever the game starts. We are calling the score, and everything should work. So now that we have done this, let's go and save and see if it is working on Unity or not. So now that we have done it, inside our game manager, we will need to add a lot of new references. So for the score text, let's drag and drop our score text right here. For play button, let's drag and drop our play button right here. For player, let's drag and drop our player right here. Now in the beginning, we need to select our player and deactivate it. And whenever the game starts, we need to activate it, and let's see if that is working. So let's click on play. So here we have our button. If we click it, as you can see, our player is here and our game starts, our obstacles come, and our score also keeps going up again and again. So our game is pretty much working, and if I collide, automatically the game gets restarted. If I click over here again, the game gets started again. So everything looks exactly as we want it to. So things are working pretty fine. If you want, you can also make it a little bit faster or slower and make the players jump a little bit higher to actually customize the game according to your own wish. You can also go ahead and add a title right here so that it is shown whenever the game starts, but I think I'm going to keep it right there. So now that our game is like this, and let's go ahead and check how it's working on a little real device. So I'm going to go to this general device simulator. From here, I'm going to select this Google Pixel 5. So now I'm going to click on play. And if I click on here, as you can see, this is how it's going to look in a real device. So this is how the scores will be, this is how the player will be, and whenever it collides, automatically the game gets restarted. Alright, so our game is ready. So now all we need to do is we need to actually build it for Android and install it in our device. So for that, I'm going to go to File, Build Settings, and make sure our current platform is set to Android. And once that's done, I'm going to go to this Player Settings tab. And here, as you can see, here we have a company name. I'm going to give my company name, but you can go ahead and give your company name or keep it default. Let's name it Cube Runner here, and let's keep the name same. You can give an icon to your game. Now from the resolution, as you can see, here we have the default orientation set to auto rotation, but since it's a portrait, we're going to set it to portrait so that our game always stays in the portrait and not goes to landscape. Now from the other settings, as you can see, here we have the package name. If you want, you can simply go ahead and change the package name. This will be unique for your game. So you can go ahead and change it or keep it same. And when you create an updated version of your game, you need to actually increment the version and the bundle version code. Okay. So with that done, now we can go ahead and click on build. And then here I'm going to create a new folder called builds. And inside the builds folder, I'm going to save it with the name Cube Runner Game, and then click on save, and it will be actually exported as an APK file which you can install in your device. Alright, so after waiting for some time, finally our APK file has been generated, and here it is. You can go ahead and transfer it to your mobile device either via USB, or you can simply email it to your device or transfer it somehow, and then you can install it to your mobile device and then you can play it. Also, you can share this APK to your friends and family and let them enjoy your game. Alright, so thanks a lot for watching this video. I hope you really enjoyed the whole process of making a complete game in this very short time. And if you want to make some more cool games like 3D Endless Runners, 2D Endless Runners, 2D Catching Game, 2D Runner Game, Racing Game and all that, I have a lot of different courses where you can learn to build all these games from these courses for your mobile devices, for your PC and all that. You can get all my courses from the links in the description of this video and from the pinned comments. So go ahead and enroll in the courses and learn how to build some more cool games. So thanks for watching. This is Raja from Charger Games, and I'm going to see you in another video very soon. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more cool tutorials. And I'm going to see you in another video very soon.